Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Intuitive Revolution in Business. I'm super excited about today's episode. I thought I was going to review the wonderful book by Simon Sinek called Start With Why, and I didn't have enough time to reread it. So this is going to be saved for another book episode, but instead I woke up yesterday morning with the perfect what I think is the perfect content with regards to books, because you might wonder, why am I doing these this cycle where every 4 weeks I do a book review. And this got me to think that, first of all, I wanted you to know that I am a book nerd, even though since having 4 autistic kids, it's a little bit more difficult for me to listen to books. So I've tended to move on to audiobooks that I listen whilst I do my chores, gardening. I used to listen to it when I was running. Sadly, I can't run anymore at this moment. So it's a natural thing for me to want to do some book reviews. I'm an author myself, and not that I ever thought I would be, and we'll talk a little bit about that a bit more further into the episode. So looking back, we have reviewed 2 books. I've reviewed Gay Hendricks' Corporate Mystic, which I absolutely adore and nobody knows about. So it felt special also because it's so linked to the subject of the topic of this podcast. And I've also reviewed Kelly Viking's Secret of the Divine Business Code. And then these 2 books are very, very different, not just because of the authors. I mean, of course, one is a male author, one is a female author, although you will probably hear me talk at some point about gender being a construct, a social and I'm not saying this to deny the experience of transgender people, because actually I have a transgender son, but I'm very interested in gender fluidity and in perhaps breaking down a little bit the gender stereotypes. Gender stereotypes actually grate me a little bit. But it's not just because of that, it's because one was self-published, Kelly's book, and the other one was traditionally published, Gay Hendricks books. Actually, it's published by his own company, but I'm pretty sure it was traditionally published. I could be wrong here, actually. I'll go back and reflect on that. And this actually is a very interesting fact, because as entrepreneurs, there will be, or as business owners even, there will be a point where we might consider writing a book. And this is what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about when is it a good time to write a book, and which one to write, and whether you should write a book at all. Okay, so we're going to explore these questions, but first I want to tell you a little bit of background about who I am as an entrepreneur and as an author, so that you understand that I have some experience of the topic of writing and publishing books. Even though you know as well as I do that my big main topic of expertise and passion, actually it's more than expertise, is using intuition. I mean, in this podcast it's about business, but to be honest, it's in every area of my life, and it started off really for me to trust my intuition as a parent, and that's been instrumental in me raising my kids and making the right decisions for them, which hasn't been easy, because when you have neurodivergent children, you don't have a manual for any of children when you have a child, but when with neurodivergent kids, it's even more difficult to know what's the right thing to do for them. So I've learned a lot about intuition from my own children, and I am so grateful. Right, so I explained to you earlier, I've always been an avid reader. Actually, books were my best friends because I was an introvert. I was very shy, and actually looking back, I think I'm autistic, and so it was very hard for me to make friends. I only had one friend when I was in primary school, and yeah, so books were, the moment I knew how to read books, my world completely opened to so many wonderful things. I always have a book with me, actually now probably more than one. That's why my Kindle has been such an amazing device, because it's kind of heavy to carry a lot of books with you. I've actually gone from being a person who would read only one book from start to finish and religiously, to now having several books and reading according to the mood, um, um, to the mood I'm in at the moment. At the moments that I choose a book, I mean, I'm not going to read a book whilst I'm on on air. Although this gives me an idea. If that's something that you were interested, I could read to you a couple of chapters of my books. But I never thought in a million years that I would write a book one day, because in school, my forte was maths and physics. I was quite artistic as well, but literature and writing were agony for me. And I can see and look back to the fact that it's because of the way it was taught, and it was very rigid, and we only, it was about literary fiction, and that definitely wasn't my style. I actually write in a very simple style, and I realized, looking into my personality, as I said, I believe I'm autistic, and even though I'm probably going to have to wait 2 to 3 years before I am assessed, I also believe I'm ADHD, and the more I learn about it, the more it makes sense. For example, it seems that ADHD people can make very complex subjects simple, and that's exactly me. I can study something incredibly complex and make it understandable by anyone. So that's what I mean when I say I can write things in a really simple way. That makes sense. So it all changed, this thing about not wanting or not even thinking I could be an author one day, in 1996. And what happened is I went through an experience that was pretty grueling, where my best friend was addicted to heroin and cocaine. And I went through such a hard time that I felt compelled, and I couldn't write a diary because my mum used to read my diary, and that was very traumatic for me. So I had to express what was happening to me in a different way. And so I decided to write a novel about us. Of course, I added some element of fiction to it. Not that much, actually, because it was already pretty pretty intense as a story, and it had the fabric of a good novel anyway. And so I started writing this book for me, just to kind of let the steam out, and write about this story that was too big to stay within me. And then a few days later, I don't know why, I went to see a numerologist, and she said I would write 3 books. And that absolutely stunned me. I was like, I looked at her like a rabbit in the headlights, because this really wasn't part of my plan. I thought writing this novel was a little bit of a side hobby. I like to have an outlet for my creativity, but no. So anyway, I had no idea about self-publishing. Back then, I thought the only way to be a proper author, a respectable author, was to go through the traditional route. So I tried to have my novel published, and I was actually rejected so many times. I went into a 10-year writer's block. So that was it. That was my book. It wasn't a dream of mine, but that was my book career, my author career, buried rather quickly, if you think about it. So interestingly enough, when I left my job as a lawyer, I trained in clinical hypnotherapy. Because it's something that I had always been interested in. I think I'd shared a little bit in an episode about this. I was interested in past life regression and all sorts of things. And the mere fact of training in clinical hypnotherapy actually resolved my writer's block without me actually knowing it had happened. And so in January 2009, I started writing a book about spirituality, because that was something that I was passionate about. And I wrote 100,000 words in English. That was the first time I wrote anything in English. So that was a big thing for me. And I went to see a clairvoyant because I wanted to check the chances of my book being published. I didn't want to go, it was almost like going to war, almost knowing that you would be killed. So for me, to get a publishing deal. So I went to see a clairvoyant, and she said, oh, no, you're not supposed to write this book. You're supposed to write a book about slimming. And I was a clinical hypnotherapist. And strangely enough, looking back, most of my clients at the time came to me for slimming. But I hadn't even written a little pamphlet for them a little ebook, or it wasn't ebook, it was a physical book that I was going to print and give to them to help them on the process. And that's why I have my first book, which was published. And for the people who are on, let me see, just I was going to say, I was going to show you my book. Yeah, I'm going to show you my two books for the people who are on YouTube, because I just love them so much. I'm so proud of them, even though they're self-published. And I'm going to say, even though, I'm going to take an even though out of the equation, because I'm going to tell you something about self-publishing. I mean, back then in 1996, when I wrote my first book, self-publishing was called vanity publishing. There was nothing about self-publishing. But you will probably have discovered, if you're an entrepreneur, that actually most coaches, most entrepreneurs, and most business books are self-published. It's actually the norm. And there's a reason for this that I'm going to dive into. So anyway, I promised I would show you the cover of my first book. You can find information about it on my website. I have a special page for my books. Not a page, a tab at the top of the menu for my books. So this one's called The Journey of the Slim Soul, and I'm very, very fond of it. It took me only 6 weeks from the time I started the first draft to the time I held the book in my hands. And that's extraordinary for someone who had a writer's block for 10 years. And I've actually learned a method to write, which, thanks to the clinical hypnotherapy bit, that really works for me. And that I actually have worked with when I was a book coach for about 2 years before I started doing Business Akashic Records and the whole thing about intuition. And I used a lot of this, a lot of the knowledge that I had as a clinical hypnotherapist to help my clients. And there's still some people, some entrepreneurs who come to me for me to support them to write their books. And I love it. But the thing is, so I was talking about vanity publishing and the fact that you will no doubt have, if you are thinking of writing a book, or if you have written a book, you know that probably your family and friends will think it's a hobby if you're not traditionally published, or will think that you need to be a famous author to be a real author. Or you need to make tons of money from your book to be a real author. And I think that's really irrelevant. But if you are like me, a little bit shaky on your legs as an author because you don't have much trust in yourself, you don't believe in yourself. I have imposter syndrome. So all along I was like, who am I to write this book? I don't know anything about slimming. Sorry, I think I'm going to cough. So I'm going to pause the sound for a second. I'm obviously clearing something here. But what I want you to know is that in 2012, completely on an impulse, I pitched my book, The Journey of the Slim Soul, to an agent, and I actually had an agent contract. He took me onto his books, and he, Hachette, which is, as you probably know, a giant in the publishing industry, a French giant in the publishing industry, was very interested in my book. What happened next is I sabotaged it. So here we go. Lesson, very, very good lesson. So it took me a couple of years before I decided to dabble again into writing. And in 2015, I was actually writing a novel. It started off in 2013 because I saw it's actually a really roundabout way. I saw a competition for a short film, and I wanted to take part in it. So I wrote it as a script to start with. And interestingly enough, I never actually pitched it, even though I thought it was really good. Anyway, a couple of years later, I decided to go on my first writer's course, and my only one, actually. I haven't been on another one since. And she invited us to go on a date with our book. And I expected my novel to turn up, script, novel, whatever you want to call it. But the book that turned up on that imaginary date was actually a memoir about my dad, on how, the last 3 months of his life and the year after. Because my dad had a brain tumor that took a turn for the worse in September 2013. My husband and I had planned to get married in the summer of 2014. We had to cancel all our plans, obviously. or maybe not, obviously, but I don't think I could have got married without my dad around, just on the back of him dying. And so the book that turned out was like a memoir about my dad, the last 3 months of his life, which were totally transformational. And again, if you might be interested in this book, go to the book tab on my website. Oh, I forgot to say what my website is. It's www.theintuitiverevolution.co.uk. So you're sorted now about that. I'm going to show you the book cover. So for those of you who are on YouTube, you'll be able to see it. For the other people, you have to go on my website. At the time, I decided to self-publish it again, but I was, and I'm not going to throw stones at her, okay? But I hired a coach that had just published her own book through a Kickstarter, and I thought she could help me launch a Kickstarter. But I didn't have the foundations in place to do that Kickstarter at all. I didn't have the following, and so it was a big flop. It was actually a disaster. I ended up losing money over it. Now, you know, we all know that books are not meant to make us money, at least in direct sales, unless you become, you know, a bestseller or anything like that. They're more like a business card, something that establishes us as an expert, as coaches and entrepreneurs. But to lose money over a book is kind of a little bit disheartening. And I took a big hit, to be honest, because I didn't want to publish or do anything for a while, even though I know I have several books in me. Well, anyway, this summer, and this is going to be the end of the bits about me. I want to talk about your book and how I can help you with it. But this summer, I decided every summer when we take some time off, and this year we had to do a staycation because COVID. This summer, I went on what I call my book retreat, my virtual book retreat, or and usually it's at home because I don't have the luxury at this point in my life to go away and write my books away from my family. But I took 2 weeks, and then in the morning, because I run my business only on Mondays, I usually wake up quite early the rest of the week, and I try and fit some more work before breakfast, before my kids wake up, and then I go and homeschool them. So I'm kind of wired to wake up early, and so during my holidays, I use that time for writing, and it's just so beautiful. When we go to Cornwall, which is what we normally do every summer, we rent a little cottage that has a beautiful summer house overlooking the sea. So I look at the sunrise, I look at the sea, and hear the seagulls, and that's where. Oops, that was yeah, I know. I'm so sorry. And because I don't know how to edit videos, this is going to stay, my dears. It's going to stay on the video. I don't think I'm going to leave it in the audio. Just a little fun thing that can happen. Anyway, so this summer, I did the second edit of my book, which is called The Intuitive Revolution in Business. So isn't that exciting? We have a podcast called The Intuition Revolution in Business, and there will now be a book. So I'm just going to plug it here. If you're interested to take part in the launch, and those of you who have taken part in the launch of my podcast will know how much fun it was. The fact that there were several prizes and competitions and an amazing spirit amongst the team. I will encourage you to sign up for my my book launch newsletter. So I will put the link in the episode description. Sign up and you will receive the first 3 chapters that are ready for you to read right away, okay? Now, I'm really excited because I'm going to implement something that I've always wanted to implement with a business book. This is the first business book that I write since I've become an intuitive business visionary. So you could see, looking back, that when I was a clinical hypnotherapist, writing a book about slimming without dieting was kind of a business book that fitted my business back then. This is the perfect book for my business now, and I'm super excited because I'm passionate about intuition and I have dug deep into the topic, and it's the business book that my business has wanted me to write for years. Okay, so I want to ask the question, and this is now taking it back to you: why write a book for your business, and when? Now, I was a bit shocked by a statement that was made by one of my first business mentor who I admired greatly. And she said that there's no money to be made in books. And I think there was, and she obviously is entitled to her opinion, but I don't believe this is true. It is true, strictly speaking, in terms of the money you might have to invest in getting your book published. But what she completely missed, which is something that I learned from Alison Jones, who's both a book coach and a business book publisher, and quite a renowned one. She's a hybrid publisher, okay? So just so that you know, there's traditional, there's self-publishing, and in between, you have hybrid publishers who are considered quite seriously in the industry of publishing because they function as a traditional publisher, but the author invests quite a lot of money into the coaching through writing the books and everything else. So it's a very clever business model, and unlike some other people who are here to take authors' money and who are not very reputable, Alison is absolutely reputable. And I will add in the show notes the link to her 10-day book proposal challenge, which I've done 3 times. And believe me, it's the best one I've ever done. Before I worked with Alison, I didn't know how to write a book proposal. She is top of the game. And when she runs her book proposal challenges, and her next one's starting on the 16th of September. I hope I'm right, but you will have the link anyway if you want to sign up. She has a way for you to think about your book and before you start writing it, which is something I never did before. I just wrote things as they came. But if you plan your book and you have a book proposal before you write your book, it kind of gives you a structure that then makes it so much easier. So it's almost like doing the foundations of your writing journey in terms of content. And I do have a course as well, which is called Get Started with Your Book, where I help you set the foundations, not in terms of content, but in terms of habit, in terms of digging into your why, in terms of understanding what your fears are around writing a book, because they are going to crop up. You know, I was listening to a very nice, very good podcast. Nice doesn't describe it. Good is a bit better, even though I know it's not a word that's very exciting, but she was talking about confidence, and she said confidence, oh no, it wasn't that one. It was the one about slimming, actually. And she said, the moment you set yourself some goals, you will have some obstacles. And at first I was like, I don't know why, but then it made sense, because when you set some goals and you commit to them, all your fears are going to crop up. So that's what she calls the obstacles. And that's what in my course, I have a whole section on identifying your fears. And fears for authors or budding authors or aspiring authors are always the same. It's the fear of success. It's the fear of failure. It's the who am I to say this? Who am I to pose as an expert on this subject? I don't know enough. And if you're a perfectionist like I am, it's like you will never write a book until you know everything about the subject, which is totally unrealistic. All you need to know is to have enough to be ahead of your ideal reader by, a fair amount. You don't need to be the expert, like everyone comes to you in the world about intuition before you write your book about intuition. So I'm owning my expert status, and I'm going to write this book about intuition, even though there's other books that have been written, and there will be other books that have been written about your topic. No one speaks in the voice that you do. No one has had the experience that you've had. So you have something to bring to the conversation. And Alison Jones said something brilliant about books. She says they're not fridges, okay? People buy one fridge and that's it. So they make the comparison. Once they have one, you can't sell them another fridge. But with books, if you observe how you act as a consumer of books, and being an avid reader, I can tell you that much. If you buy a book about a topic, you want to buy several books about the same topic, because they'll all have a different slant on it and a different approach. And if you take slimming, for example, and I've been consuming quite a few, even though I'm completely anti-diet, but it can give you inspiration in a different way. It's a fresh way to present the same information. And if you try several times to get on a certain journey or tackle a certain topic, it's always a good thing to have different points of view, because even if you retain only one thing in the book that makes a difference, then it'll be worth reading. That's my point of view. That's my opinion anyway. So I recommend, and I will put this in the show notes as well, Alison Jones's book, which is called This Book Means Business. And I'm probably going to review actually for the podcast. So I'm going to make some notes when I'm finished today, just to remind myself that it's a very good idea to review Alison Jones' book, because everybody who listens to this podcast will at one point or another ask themselves whether they want to write a book or whether it's a good idea. And Alison's book explains how you can use a book to actually be at the core of your content strategy. So it doesn't take anything away from your business. If anything, it brings everything together. It gives you a focus, and you're actually going to have a much better content strategy by writing a book, because you can share as you go along. And this is exactly what I'm doing. Look at it. So that she has a quote at the start of the book that I read yesterday, and I thought, oh my God, right? So, and I read it a while back. I don't know why it struck me yesterday more than ever. And so the quote is, "The book that will change your life is the book you write." And that's by Seth Godin. And it's true. I can tell you from having written 5 or 6 books to date, that writing books has been instrumental into me. It's a way to reflect on things. You know, you can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you don't write it down and if you don't acknowledge that you have it, you will probably discard it. And that's what I did. But when I started writing that book about slimming, for example, I thought I knew nothing about slimming. And I realized by writing it that actually I was kind of an expert on it. Not from a nutrition point of view, not from a personal trainer point of view, but I'd tried so many things and I was fed up with the dieting industry. And I wanted to bring forth a different voice that could, make a difference in women's lives that were spoiled by all this, how do you say, NLPing in a way that, tried to convince them that they were lazy or that they were the problem, and that they had to punish themselves in order to have the body that they wanted. So there's all sorts of things that I wanted to write about. And I realized I had a lot to say about the subject, but it's only when I started writing about it that I realized how much I had to say. When I wrote my memoir, it was obviously a very different thing, but I realized it was very therapeutic. And I think memoirs are always therapeutic and very healing for the person that writes them. But I realized I had a lot of very meaningful things to say about, father-daughter relationships, about illness, about all sorts of things, about healing, because I'm a Reiki master. And of course, it's at the heart of the book because I could have helped my dad. I didn't want to, and I did help my dad. It was a long journey though, with his brain tumor. And so the underlying principle under my book, because every book has one concept, is that it's never too late to make peace with your dad. And that's what I did. And it was also a message to give hope to people who are going through the same thing and who needed maybe a different way to look at things. So in short, if I sum up, writing a book will enable you to acknowledge how much you know about your topic. It will encourage you to deepen the knowledge because you'll be doing some research. And that's what I've been doing about intuition. And it's been so good to learn from other people who talk about intuition. And it will also enable you to look at your competition through the book research and the competitive titles and to position yourself. Okay, so I know a lot of intuition teachers on the market talk about how important meditation is for intuition. And it's almost like repeated ad nauseum. You can't hear about intuition without talking about meditation or hearing about meditation. And my place on the market is to actually shake the industry and say, you do not have to meditate. You do not have to wear crystals or give up on coffee or wine in order to be able to tap into your intuition. So that's how I was able to position myself by doing all this book research, which I did actually 2 years ago when I took part in Alison's 10-day challenge, because I did this research and all these people talked about intuition a different way, but they almost all talked about meditation, which was really great of me in a way. And the last is going to establish you as an expert. And I think that's a really important thing. You know, even as a podcast host, I have now been contacted by people who are interested in me talking to their audience because I have become the expert. I was the expert before that because I say I have done a PhD in intuition by exploring the intuitive world for 15 years, both as a medium, a psychic, a tarot reader, an animal communicator. I've done so many different things. It's almost funny looking back. And then I brought all of this back for the business world and to be able to talk to you more on a more grounded way, in a more layman perspective or in a more business perspective, because I don't think if I spoke the fluffy unicorn language, I think you would be put off, right? So I have some good news for you, okay? I want you to know that writing a business book is the easiest book to write. If you compare it to memoir and to novels, business books, how-to books are fairly simple. But you absolutely need to know who your niche is, who your ideal client is, and the transformation you facilitate, and the transformation that they want, okay? So for some, you will be clear about that at the startup phase of your business. But for a lot of you, just like me, it will take you a while to be completely clear on your niche and exactly what your business is about. You also want to make sure that you write your book for your future client, not your existing client, in the sense that if you know for sure that your existing client is your future client, then you're fine. But if you feel a little bit frustrated with your ideal client at the moment and you know that it might be likely to evolve, then you want to write a book for your future clients, because your book will have a shelf life, of several years. So you want to look at the vision and then write the book that fits your vision, even if your ideal client in the future was different from the one that you have today, even if you're pivoting into another area at the moment, okay? The bad news is you will never feel ready, okay? So don't even think that these are excuses from your ego to try and keep you small, to try and keep you from doing something that's scary. And you need to actually, 50% of writing a book is mindset. So you need to actually be aware of that, have the tools to deal with that. But I would probably encourage you to hire someone who can support you with that. So if you have established that you're ready to write a book, well, you'll never be ready, but if that it's a good idea for you to write a book for your business right now, you need to decide what book to write. And I will tell you one thing, even if you have only one topic you want to write about, there could be 6, 7, 10 different ways to write that book. So you need to write, you need to be very focused and to know who you're writing for, so that you can literally have an avatar of your ideal clients that you're going to speak to. You don't write the same book about intuition, for example, for academics, then you would write it for a business person, that you would write it for a mother, or you would write it for the layman, right? It's not even the same way you'd write it if it was a female reader or if it was a male reader. So these are all the things that you need to determine before you start writing your book. And it has to be, now I want to go back to something that happened with one of my VIPs last week, and I hope she won't mind me sharing this. She was trying to write a book that she thought she was supposed to write. And the jury is still out on which book she should be writing, because it's going to be something we discussed in our next session. But there was another book that wanted to be written that she had already started writing. So this is where I'm saying the mindset part is really important, so that you don't let your ego come in the way of what you're supposed to write. And that's why I love how we can have learned actually over the years how to tune into the energy of the book that wants to be written through me, the books that my business wants me to write, rather than the book that I want to write. And I nearly got derailed this year because I started writing a memoir about how I went from being a lawyer to being a business visionary. And that was actually distracting me from writing the book that my business wanted to write. So it's always possible for it to happen to anyone, including me, who, you know, raves about intuition. But my ego is very strong. My mind is very, very strong. You know, I was a lawyer. And funnily enough, actually, last week I did a test because I found a quiz about, it wasn't strictly about intuition, but it was to determine whether you were more logical minded or creatively minded. And I ranked second to top in the logical side of things. And it got me to reflect and say, yeah, of course, that's why it's been so hard for me to embrace my intuition. But my default mode is logic. And so I'm constantly in danger of falling into the trap of deciding something on because it sounds good or because someone else recommends it to me, rather than follow my intuition that will take me on a completely different path. And very often these two aspects are fighting with each other. So just to recap, I've talked about, you know, my journey as an author, which I never regretted. It's been an amazing journey. And now I absolutely love writing books. I found a way that works for me. You can also sign up to support me for my book launch if you want to, and I would be delighted if you did. And also, I would say if you want to discuss a business book or have some clarity, why not book a discovery call with me? I would love to have that chat to, you know, to just to a bit of a brainstorm. All the links will be in the show notes or on YouTube underneath in the comment box. No, not the comment, what do they call, content box. Okay. And if you, last but not least, if you have a business book that you've already published and that you'd like me to review on this podcast, I encourage you to get in touch with me and send me a copy of your book, and I'll consider it. Okay. I only do these episodes about books once a month, so there's a bit of a queue, but I would be delighted to consider it, because as we started the conversation today about traditionally published and self-published, of course, when you self-publish, you need to be on as many podcasts as possible to promote your book. And I want to be someone who helps other entrepreneurs promote their book. I did that for Kelly Vickings last month, and I absolutely loved it. I might not promote your book even if you send it to me, because I need to like sort of have a quality criteria to what I promote, and it's notorious that in the self-publishing world, the quality of books can be very, very different. It can go from very high quality, like the one that I had. You know, I managed to sign up an agent, and that was actually a wonderful way for me to recognize that I was actually a good author, despite the fact that I had so many obstacles to being a good author. But there's some people who publish books that are really too poor quality, and I wouldn't want to recommend them. So I hope you'll understand that I won't offend you if I reject your book, but please do pitch it to me, and I'd love to do a review if I feel it's a good match for my audience and that it would benefit them. Right, that's it for today. I think next week is a Q&A. So if you have any questions, please go head over to my page, which is called, let me just check now, because I'm not good with names, so I can't remember. I think it's a little bit like the title of this podcast, but it's not completely. So sometimes it gets me a bit confused. So my Facebook page, I'm not on Instagram. I don't have the time to dedicate to that. It's called Intuitive Revolution in Business, sorry. So same title. I've simplified things recently. Thank you so much for listening to the end, and I'll see you again next week. Have a wonderful week. Bye for now.